Call today's special meeting of County Council to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Optional prayer, Councilwoman Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let us pray. It is the season of forgiving, new beginnings, and thinking of others. We want to leave a mark on the earth in the hearts of others that they will remember fondly. It is the season for smiles and embraces to celebrate life and the beauty of what it is exploding around us. We are reminded that we must govern not with anger and spite, with the best meanings and thoughts for others. As we look deep inside, old, young, alike, there is a place we know that we keep the caring for others, and in this time it will burst urging us to grow and keep the hope that we do our best as we have been charged to do. Amen.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Roll call, Mr. Smith.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Here.
Mrs. Fatika?
Here.
Dr. Faust?
Here.
Mr. Leone?
Here.
Mrs. Law?
Here.
Mr. Horton?
Here.
Chairman Brenneman?
Here. Hearing of the public, those who called ahead will have 5 minutes. Those who did not will have 3. First off, that called ahead was Lisa Austin. Is she here? No. Adam Trott? Cynthia Muhammad? No? Okay. No, no substitutes. I'm sorry. For anybody else that comes up, you'll come up and give your name and municipality, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name's Freda Tepfer. I live in Erie. I'm a certified orientation and mobility specialist. And first of all, I want to urge all the members of the council and everybody here to be sure to take the opportunity between now and December 31st to go online and look at the plan, the master plan, draft master plan for the port, and to comment on it. I don't know if everybody would like to see a Ferris wheel and lots of more buildings and stores at Dobbins Landing and Liberty Park, but I wouldn't. And I just encourage you to take a look and see how do we want to preserve this area that is the nature and the backyard for people who don't have a car and can't get to Presque Isle easily. I'm here also because I would like to urge the council to go ahead and adopt the fees, the $5 fee for licenses. I actually have known about it since September, and I think it's an excellent idea. Most of the counties in the state are already collecting this fee. It's not a burden on vehicle owners to have an additional $5, and a project that could certainly benefit from part of the use of this fee would be the rehabilitation of the McBride Viaduct. This is an important resource for East Erie and everybody in this town to send a message that we care about all people and that we care about the safety of our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Name and municipality, and you have 3 minutes.
Yes, my name is Joel Miller from Summit Township, and I represent the Apartment Association, Northwestern Pennsylvania Council. Just a couple of quick comments regarding the proposed amendments to the anti-discrimination ordinance. First of all, as it stands right now, I believe you're considering a 10-year look back for determining whether we should consider somebody's criminal history 10 years from the point of conviction. Just want to reiterate that we really believe that the time should be based on the length of time that somebody has been out of jail, prison, whatever, off probation, in some fashion that way, because as you know, if let's say somebody is convicted of a violent crime 25 years ago and they get out last month, they're not necessarily ready to rent, and we should be able to consider their activities in society. So again, I believe that the time period should be connected to the time of release. But more importantly, referring to Section 9 of the ordinance and paragraph 6, it says, make any inquiry elicit, they should not make any inquiry, elicit any information, make or keep any record or use any form of application for the purchase, rental, or lease of housing accommodations, or to make any real estate appraisals containing questions or entries concerning race, color, familial status, age, religious creed, and ancestry, sex, gender, identity, national origin, sexual orientation. It's all fine to that point, but I realize somebody just went through the Word document and added criminal history and source of income every place that those other things were listed. But in this particular paragraph, you may need to rework the wording because, of course, when somebody's applying for an apartment, we do need to use an application, usually paper, sometimes online. And we absolutely, it's all about uncovering their source of income and determining whether they can pay for the apartment. And also, that would be how we would find out whether there is a criminal history that we need to determine is within whether we should consider it or not. And we absolutely have to keep the applications by federal regulations so that we can prove that we have not discriminated. Because we have to ask the applicants all the same questions and process all the applications the same. So something would need to be changed in that paragraph in order to allow us to operate the way we all know we have to. So just wanted to make sure that that was taken into consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Name and municipality, you have 3 minutes.
Charles Mock, Erie County. I also stand in support of the $5 fee that would be levied to increase revenue for various reasons, especially around revitalization. And I believe that there are certain sections of the city that need all of the additional revenue as possible to make it a part of the total refocus Erie development strategy. I stand because I do believe that even in the newspaper where we heard and read that there's a tremendous amount of equity being built up, equity funds to develop downtown. What kind of equity is being built to help the other areas of the city of Erie? I stand to say that the bridges that are in existence at this point through additional revenue and support could be saved, they could be repaired, they could be refocused for use for the sake of people who are some of the most vulnerable people in our community. I'm concerned after living in Erie for 24 years now and concerned about the kind of reports that have appeared in the newspaper that suggest that there is a section of people in Erie who could care less, obviously, about certain sections of the city, and the evidence is the lack of resources that go into those certain sections. The Viaduct Bridge is an area specifically that I'm talking about where 30% of folks in that area, that tract, are low income and very diverse in their demography. And that bridge being closed does not help the businesses in that area to attract customers. And so as we think about all of Erie, as we think about refocus and the strategies to develop all of Erie, to make all of Erie better, let's not leave one section behind. Let's think about all of the folks and the unintentional consequences that are going to take place if we do not allow this bridge to stay open. And the issue is whether or not there are funds to repair it and to sustain it. Well, with this kind of vote and the $5 fee, I think that is one of the creative ways in which we can sustain the bridges that need to be sustained and make them safe and repurpose them for a group of people who use that bridge. And that bridge will bring relief from the Bayfront bridge as well. So there are reasons for us to save and there are reasons for us to demolish. Let us be really wise about how we think about how we can use additional revenue to support that can be supported, and to send a signal to all of the people in Erie that we care about all of you. We care about every section of the town and not just downtown.
Thank you, sir. Lisa Austin, you called ahead, so you'll have 5 minutes. Name and municipality. And
Lisa Austin, Erie, Pennsylvania. I applaud the remarks just made by Reverend Mock from the African American Concerned Clergy, and also he's obviously from the church at 10th and German Community Baptist. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your service tonight. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, and you have before you 3 important pieces of legislation, which I hope you will support. I wanted to comment that when I was running for office, I met a young man who actually was crying because he said we were talking about employment, and he actually broke down saying that he couldn't find a job because of his record, and he'd paid his time and really wanted the opportunity to work. So I hope that you will support the anti-discrimination for people who have served their time. Secondly, I wanted to speak out again in support of the countywide land bank. It's something that's very, very important and necessary to our regional revitalization. We must start thinking as a region instead of municipality by municipality, and to do that, we have to designate and protect some areas. Then thirdly, I wanted to add to the remarks that I heard Reverend Mock commenting on about the plan to add on a $5 fee to vehicle registration in order to create a pool of money that could be used for municipal roadways, bike paths, and to repair and revitalize existing structures like the McBride Viaduct. You're all familiar with all of the news coverage lately that has really pointed to a surprising fact, something that we have been advocating for quite a long time, that the cost to rehab this bridge is $3 million. That is less than the cost of actually tearing it down. And PennDOT explained to us again that the money available that can be directly put into this is $1.7 million. This will be coming, of course, from PennDOT to the city. It cannot go to a private entity. So the city must, step up and embrace this responsibility. And with the funds that will be raised through the new registration fee, that could in part make up the balance of the $1.3 million that would be necessary. However, we do not expect to rely exclusively on the county for that kind of support. We stand ready to work with the city and Mayor-elect Schember's new grant writer and city planner to work and write grants. There are so many. There are dozens of grants out there, placemaking grants, infrastructure grants, grants about community health. And that ties into the reality that if this bridge is torn down, the people with the least ability to speak for themselves, middle school children, will have to walk over 2,000 feet along a busy highway, breathing in fumes, having snow and rain flung into their face as they walk to school. This is not something anybody, and I heard Councilman Horton speak to this specifically, anybody would want for their children or grandchildren, and we should all not want it for any of the children of Erie County. So I ask you to support these 3 initiatives, and again, I thank you for your work and wish you a Merry Christmas.
Thank you. 2 minutes under, too. Next person, you'll have name and municipality, and you'll have 3 minutes.
My name is Mark Kibbe, resident of Mill Creek. I'm also a realtor in the Erie community, and I'm on the board of directors for the Greater Erie Board of Realtors. I'm here, we want to applaud County Council tonight for its efforts to find a solution to the growing problem of blight in our community. The 2 proposals that recently have been put forth to begin to address this issue within county-wide focus, one by County Executive Dahlkamper and the other by Councilmember Faust, each contain a number of very positive provisions designed to move the ball forward. We are not here to express a preference for either proposal, but we urge County Council to work closely with the City of Erie and Mayor Schember, as well as the city's land bank, to coordinate efforts to address this issue. By working together, I think we can make greater strides to get this issue addressed. However, under either proposal, we would strongly urge you to include on the relevant board a realtor, someone with extensive knowledge of the process of buying and selling real estate. That knowledge and experience will be central to any effective solution to the blight issue. As you are aware, the city's land bank has members of the real estate profession on its board of directors, and the Greater Erie Board of Realtors, we do stand ready to assist you in this important endeavor. Council is also considering this evening a proposal to increase the recording fee for deeds and mortgages by $14.25 to increase funds available for addressing blight. At first glance, $14.25 doesn't seem like a lot of money. However, we would urge council to carefully take into account what home buyers already pay when they go to purchase a new home. The average price of a single-family home in Erie County is currently around $136,000. Assuming that they purchase that home with a conventional mortgage, pretty conservative, a minimum 5% down, the out-of-pocket costs for that home buying would be in excess of $17,000. In addition to the down payment, that amount includes financing costs, inspection costs, transfer taxes, title insurance, the $100 City of Erie engineering fee for homes in the city, and many more. I do have a handout with more details about that. You're welcome to look at it. I'd be glad to share that. So every time we add a new fee to this list, the number of potential home buyers is reduced. As realtors, we see firsthand every day how home buyers pay very close attention to these costs, and very often small adjustments to these costs determine whether they move forward with the purchase or not. In fact, the home buyers most sensitive to changes in these costs could very well be some of the buyers most in a position to purchase ultimately some of these homes that we're looking to refurbish through this effort addressing blight. Those properties would then be brought back on the active property tax rolls. So we would urge members of council to reject this fee increase. Again, it's not a huge amount of money, but it continues to grow the cost associated with purchasing homes, which the folks least able to do, it really does matter to them.
Thank you, sir.
For your consideration.
Anyone else from the public? Name and municipality, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Brent Davis, Green Township. So I've heard many here on council during the campaign trails speak about principles of government and fighting for Erie County and its residents. Many have spoken about life, have jobs with its sustainable wages, and aiding those to rise from poverty through empowerment. Yet the fact remains 5.3% of Erie County, totaling over 7,000 residents, still remain on unemployment. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for those that are registered. When we talk about a $5 increase to the vehicle fees, $5, what does that seem to many of us with jobs? Minuscule. But the reality is, for instance, last week, a mother of two was caught in traffic, 4 bald tires on her car, as myself and 2 of my workers got out and helped her push her up to the side of the road. $5 to some of these people that are caught in the trap of poverty, that's a large amount of money. The average entry-level wage in Erie County, according to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, is $19,070. $19,070. What does that matter? A $5 tax, that simply is just another link in a chain that's all too heavy for folks that are struggling in poverty. The real struggle is out here. It's all throughout our county. There's many that are quietly struggling with poverty and bills. You know, when we ran for office and when many of you were elected, we chose to carry a torch to represent all of Erie County. That's all the municipalities for those of us throughout the county, Albion, West County, Corey, and so on. We have a responsibility when stepping forward into public service to make the hard decisions, to have the difficult conversations, and embody that intestinal fortitude to take the hard right over the easy wrong. And stating this $5 fee is exactly that time. You can vote for a tax increase or a fee, call it what you will. It's $5 now and soon could become $25, $50, and $100. It becomes unmanageable. And fill the county coffers yet again with millions of dollars on the backs of hardworking Erie County residents. I implore you to vote no. Vote no and send a message to the rest of the counties across Pennsylvania that we'll stand against increased taxation, even if we must stand alone. Send our message. Say to Pennsylvania and to the rest of the nation that we want your business, that we want your families, and we want your investments. Vote no to the increased taxes and increased fees. Thank you.
Thank you. Name and municipality, you have 3 minutes.
Jim McGoey, City of Erie. I agree with everything that Mark Kibbe said to you folks earlier. There's a couple of things I'd like to address. In regards to the formation of the board that runs either one of these organizations. You mentioned hiring an executive director and staff. You would reduce that if you had a realtor, an appraiser, a banker, and an attorney on that board. They're all familiar with the process. Number two, if that doesn't work, you have an arm in place, a county arm of the government right in place now with an executive director and a staff that could administer this. What I'm telling you is I'm trying to save the $1 million for blight and not reduce that million by 200 or 300,000 for salaries. You might consider using the County Redevelopment Authority as the arm to administer this whole progress. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next citizen to be heard. Name and municipality, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, my name is Julie Minnick, and I am from Erie, Pennsylvania. And I am the Assistant Executive Director of Olive Board Erie. And I would like to encourage you to adopt this fee. $5 is a latte for most of us, and a car is an option. So if people are struggling in poverty, I have read a statistic that I think it's 40% are in poverty, and then when you consider the cost of a vehicle, it's more like 70 if you consider debt and student loans and all of that. So if that's a reality, there are different ways to get out of poverty than, if you want to get out of poverty, I'm saying reduce your car. You should only have one car per household, not 2 or 3. And I do realize it's a struggle, but the bus is a good alternative. So I do encourage this fee, and one of the reasons All Board Erie supports this is because we need, as a city, pedestrian bridges. Everywhere in every kind of city that is growing, there are pedestrian bridges. If you go across a 4-lane highway, odds are in another city you would have a pedestrian bridge to get you safely across. That's why the McBride Viaduct needs to be saved. It's a pedestrian bridge. It's built. It has historic links, and I urge you to pass this fee. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Anyone else from the public wish to speak? Seeing none, we'll move on. Minutes from the previous meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting? Moved by Councilman Leon, seconded by Dr. Faust. Any discussion? Roll call?
On the minutes, Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika.
Yes.
Dr. Faust.
Yes.
Mr. Leon.
Yes.
Mrs. Law.
Yes.
Mr. Horton.
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Reports of county official, Finance Committee, Mr. Horton.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. The Finance Committee met last Thursday, December 15th, and just agreed to add under new business items A, B, and C, which pertain to an increase in fees for our council's accountant, also the resolution of the Erie Area Council of Governments budget, and finally, we have one appointment to the Erie County Industrial Development Authority. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Councilman Horton. There were no other reports of council. I do have one. I do want to apologize ahead of time because it is rather lengthy, so bear with me. During the course of the 2018 year, there's nothing you can do about it.
That's not what you told us back there.
No, I said my closing going away speech was going to be short, but that my report was going to be long, so
That's not what I heard.
that's the trade-off.
That's not what I heard.
Yeah.
I agree.
We hear different things. During the course of the 2018 Erie County Budget Review and Deliberations, I requested all 19 recipients of unrestricted county grants to provide copies of how they spent those grants in previous years. Those grants amounted to nearly $2 million. From what I was told, such a request of information has never been made before, and for years prior, the grants were normally renewed year after year, including the occasional increase. Prior to 2007, many of these grants were paid for out of the general fund, but since then have been paid out of the county's portion of gaming revenue. As of right now, there is no formal grant request process for an organization to seek these funds, be it their first time or for the yearly renewal consideration, nor is there a meaningful review or reporting framework for how the grant was utilized. A few of my colleagues and I have advocated for better reporting and better standardization of how these county grants are accessed and used, and I am hopeful that council and the administration will see fit to continue down this path in the coming year. After seeing how some of these grants were used, council reduced or eliminated some of these grants and has restricted the grant to one such organization, GCAC. In restricting those grant dollars to GCAC, we sought further information regarding how and why GCAC used those county dollars, those county grants. Many of us were shocked to see that GCAC used their grants to pay for such things such as their annual dinner at around $25,000, meals and other expenses for GCAC board members at around $10,000, meals and other expenses for GCAC staff at around $9,000, conference expenses at around $22,000, insurance for their board members at around $9,000, organizational membership fees of around $13,000, and sponsorship of events at $23,000. Mind you, this is county taxpayer dollars sponsoring such events with GCAC's name on it. This led me to question why we pay them anything, and what I discovered is that GCAC is truly an outlier in Pennsylvania. Under further analysis, I learned that the majority of community action committees and area agencies on aging, which GCAC is designated for both, in nearby and comparable counties have significantly lower overhead and administrative costs. Secondly, GCAC in Erie County is an anomaly in that Erie County provides this organization with an unrestricted grant for purposes that seemingly every other like organization in Pennsylvania is able to do independent of their county. Even counties that have a CAC or a AAA in-house, this is where they run it as a department rather than a separate nonprofit, are able to do so largely without additional county dollars. They're able to meet their mission goals through the block grants they receive and other revenues to include fees and fundraising. And fundraising is something that GCAC reports that they don't do. Years ago, I was initially told that GCAC uses county dollars in order to bring in even greater state and federal dollars. However, this is largely a false narrative. Because GCAC receives those grant dollars, over $28 million, by nature of being the designated Community Action Committee or Area Agency on Aging for Erie County. They receive that $28 million irrespective of what the county gives them. For instance, if any other organization or county department had their designation or contracts, they too would receive that amount from the state or federal government without additional local match. Out of the roughly $700,000 we provide unrestricted to GCAC, only about $97,000 is used as actual match dollars for small programs that are indeed good programs, but are not core services for their area agency on aging. These match dollars are for ancillary programs that are often run by United Ways, church groups, chambers of commerce, and so on. GCAC used the remainder of the county grants for administrative expenses. I must commend GCAC for providing most of the information requested of them in a timely manner, though they were not entirely forthright. It was like pulling teeth to get GCAC to provide the true match dollar amounts, and we were often provided the vague line that they use the county dollars to support administrative costs. This regularly provided remark is unusual because, again, seemingly every other entity of this type in Pennsylvania is able to meet their mission without such a financial contribution from their county. Earlier this month, at a meeting held by the administration, council, and GCAC, we informed them that many of these expenses were not acceptable even under county practices. GCAC executives explained that they would happily oblige not to use the funds for such purposes, such as the meals for the board members, but they were adamant that their grant amounts stay the same. This, to me, demonstrates their lack of concern for the public's money, because if anything, they should request less dollars if merely to comply with such county practices. GCAC executives even admitted that they have kept certain programs at level funding, even though the state has shifted their focus and thus grant dollars on other services. If GCAC were a county department, such a shift in state funding would likely have led to changes in county funding as well. Sit through any budgetary meeting regarding the county health department to see this as an example. What also stood out to me were their rental expenses. Somebody gonna close the door for, great. You're not gonna charge us extra for closing the door, are you? No? What stood out to me were their rental expenses. I had thought that GCAC owned their building, so I looked up the property on the county website and discovered it was owned by another entity, the Greater Erie Economic Development Corporation, or GDAC. Because their names are so similar and because they are registered as one, I will hereafter refer to GDAC as the Foundation. This prompted me to learn more about GCAC, the Foundation, and their relationship. Over the past 2 months, I have collected a mountain of information through federal filings and information provided both in writing and in person by GCAC. What I discovered was worrisome. Though I have attached to this memo even more details on their finances, the following are the key highlights that should speak for themselves. Since 2001, GCAC has paid the Foundation over $8.5 million in rent for a building that is only assessed at $1.4 million. The rent is paid for by the programmatic occupancy fees granted to GCAC by county, state, and federal grants, including a significant portion of the county's unrestricted grant. For charitable purpose, the rent is claimed to be below market value at about $5 or $6 per square foot, but GCAC assumes the cost of maintenance, which effectively puts their true occupancy cost at double that rate. According to their IRS filings, this rent has varied wildly since 2001, from as low as $200,000 to as high as $1.2 million. If GCAC owned the building with a mortgage, for comparison, they could have saved over $5 million for that same time period. For over 40 years, GCAC and the foundation have shared the same CEO, from R. Benjamin Wiley to Ronald Steele, and recently Georgia Del Freo, who, according to federal filings, was acting CEO for both organizations. This shared CEO collected a salary from both organizations, with the foundation claiming that the CEO worked for them for 20 hours per week. This combined salary usually amounted to around $200,000 a year. This relationship of having a shared CEO ended recently, and apparently informally, when there was disagreement between the two organizations about whom would succeed Mr. Steele as CEO for GCAC. The foundation board members also collected a salary of between $60,000 and $110,000 per year combined. According to their IRS filings, their board members work 8 hours per week. The foundation maintains a sizable pension, presumably for their CEO and perhaps their board members. Because of money granted to the foundation from GCAC, the foundation recently cashed in on investments worth over $16 million. Despite serving as a revolving revenue source for GCAC, there is word now that the foundation is seeking to distance itself from GCAC, leaving GCAC without what has effectively been their de facto foundation for over 40 years. For anyone who is interested, I have shared all of this information in the mountain of source documents with Council's office, our financial advisor, the administration, the county controller, and the press. I believe that the public deserves to know how their dollars are spent, and they should know that, at least in this case, those dollars could serve a more meaningful purpose elsewhere. I want to point to the gravity of why this is all very important. Often we hear from nonprofits like the community centers who approach city or county governments requesting supportive funding. They are often turned away with such lines as, "We don't have the money," or that "We'd like to give you funding, but that we cannot simply afford to fund everything." Furthermore, county officials regularly critique every penny spent by county departments and some authorities while overlooking such a significant expense that has amounted to millions and millions of dollars virtually unchecked and right under our nose. To be perfectly frank, I think any rational person can see that the county has been unfair and indeed reckless in funding GCAC in this manner, and that the county should end this practice immediately. Aside from the $97,000 in county dollars that GCAC utilizes for true local match, the county should limit any future funding to GCAC for contracted services only. The remainder of those funds should go to support other programs and agencies, including the community college. GCAC, who has essentially been using these county dollars as a slush fund, should streamline their administrative costs so that they operate as efficiently as similar agencies around the Commonwealth. They might also want to consider purchasing the building they currently rent or find another building elsewhere. Additionally, the foundation has a responsibility to GCAC because not only have the two organizations been joined at the hip for over 40 years, but the foundation owes every penny they have to GCAC. And GCAC, with the support of the county, should do everything in their power to ensure the foundation continues to fulfill their financial duty to support GCAC. No one should simply accept the separation of these two organizations if such information, which was provided by GCAC executives, turns out to be true, because such a separation would be financially abusive and negligent to GCAC and would negatively impact the credibility of the foundation. Lastly, I would encourage the foundation to end the practice of paying their board members and to operate more visibly in supporting the needs of the Erie community. I am making these facts public because I understand the pressure elected officials and agency leaders can feel when it comes to practices that have gone on for decades, and given the stature of the organization and people involved, such pressure could make it difficult for the necessary changes that need to occur. The vast majority of this information exists in the public domain already, but when put together tells a story no one can ignore. Because my term on council is almost over, I am unable to pursue such changes officially, so I'll leave it up to county officials and an informed public to see it through. This matter affects the public's dollars, our community's designated anti-poverty and aging services agency, and an organization that owes its nonprofit status to provide a charitable purpose to our community. Given the rate of pervasive poverty in our community and the roles of everyone involved, it is my hope that this becomes a teachable moment and a catalyst for positive change. Don't just take my word for it. Look at the facts and decide for yourself. I've provided this to our staff and also greater information that will be included in the minutes. And then I do have all the source documents, which stacked together would be taller than my head right now. And should anybody need that information, again, council staff, financial advisor, controller has available. So I apologize for a lengthy report. It's probably the longest one I've ever made. But moving on, we'll go to old business. I believe we still have ordinance 87, which is the HRC ordinance, still on the table. And I don't believe there's any motion to remove that from the table. So we'll move on to second reading of ordinance number. But before we move on to that, I will explain that council had talked to our solicitor, and we've reviewed this at length, and we feel that the HRC ordinance requires lengthy review by our solicitor because it seems that even what was pointed out by one of the speakers here, Joel, I believe, that there were some things that were contradictory and that it needs to be tightened up for it to be properly implemented. But moving on to second reading of ordinance number 124 in title only.
Second reading of ordinance number 124, 2017, amending Erie County Gaming Revenue Authority Article 2, 5D1F of the Administrative Code of Erie County, previously amended by ordinance number 145, 2016.
Moved by Mr. Leon,
Second.
seconded by Councilwoman Fatika. Any discussion? Roll call, Mr. Smith.
On ordinance 124, Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
No.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
No.
Chairman Brenneman.
No. Second reading of ordinance number 125 in title only.
A second reading of ordinance number 125, 2017, amending the Erie County Affordable Housing Fund ordinance.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilman Leon, seconded by Councilwoman Law. Any discussion? Roll call.
On ordinance 125, Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leon,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 126 in title only.
A second reading of ordinance number 126, 2017, authorizing the organization of the Neighborhood and Infrastructure Revitalization Fund, NERF, and governing board.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Faust. I'll second that, or second by Mr. DiMatteo.
Second.
Any discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Faust.
I was originally going to move to make this just a 7-member board, but our previous action to expand the board on ECRA sort of makes that moot, so I will not amend the ordinance. We'll just vote it up or down as is.
Any other discussion? Roll call.
On ordinance 126, Mr. Leon,
No.
Mrs. Law,
No.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
No.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 127 in title only.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leon.
I'm assuming that ordinance 126 passed.
It
That's
passed
correct.
4 to 3.
What?
4 to 3.
Yeah, well, I'm assuming it passed, so I don't know what good it would be to
Well,
even read the ordinance. If you want, go ahead.
let's read it and see if there's a motion or not.
Okay.
In title only, please.
Second reading of ordinance number 127, 2017, an ordinance to create the Erie County Land Bank, providing for a board of directors, powers, and funding.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Faust,
Second.
seconded by Mr. DiMatteo. Any discussion? Roll call?
know-
Mr. Chairman, before you go on a roll call, we're voting now on ordinance 127, is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Lowell,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
No.
Mr. DiMatteo,
No.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes, I'm sorry, no.
Mr. Leone,
Yes,
Chairman Brenneman.
No. Okay, moving on. Second reading of ordinance number 128 in title only.
A second reading of ordinance number 128, 2017, an ordinance for the implementation of a fee for local use as provided by 75 PA CSA subsection 1925 for each non-exempt vehicle registered to an address in Erie County.
so moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Leone, seconded by Dr. Faust. Any discussion?
Chairman.
Dr. Faust?
Just quickly, I fully appreciate where the members of the public came to speak against this particular fee tonight, but, you know, to me, as an elected official, I have to take into consideration that if I'm gonna increase a fee or a tax, whatever you wanna call it, I have to determine what type of benefits are gonna come about in this community as a result of us assessing that fee or that tax. And does it outweigh, and hopefully far outweigh, whatever cost that we're going to apply to the public for the benefit that's gonna follow it? And I think that for $5 per person, the millions of dollars in benefits that we can bring to those that live in poverty or maybe close to poverty and improve this community is worth it, and that's why I will vote yes on this ordinance, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion? Councilwoman Law?
Yes, originally, when I first took a first glance at this ordinance, I was definitely against totally, till I took a look at it and read all of the details that I could, and found that there is quite a huge exemption list of vehicles that do not get taxed on this issue, so I'm going to be voting yes. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilwoman Fatiga?
I looked at this much the way I did from my medical background. Looking at, in the medical field, the time I spent in public health, that prevention costs are much less than the cost to fix something. And so I took my analogy and spoke with Bill Pettit from PennDOT and said, is this the way, is this what we're looking at? So if we're asking people to give us $5 now, is that going to mean that it's going to prevent us from asking for a lot of money when the bridges collapse? So it's either, pay me now or pay me later. And then in recent weeks, there's been more and more talk about the whole country and the infrastructure and the issue with bridges. So it's not just that this will allow for the inspection and the prevention of problems that would end up costing us a lot of money, but in addition, a failing bridge structure will cost lives. So I will definitely be voting yes.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. DiMatteo?
Just real briefly, I did actually receive a lot of phone calls and actually quite a few emails. And I don't know, it could have been Mr. Davis who spoke to this or maybe somebody else. I'm not in favor of this, and I know it's only $5. $5 does not change what my family is going to eat tonight or the fact that my kids are going to go back to college for their next semester. That doesn't affect me, but it does affect a large group of the people who live in my district. And over the years, and this is my last meeting, I guess I would like to say that, I try to watch out for that small person. We it has nothing to do with the other members on council, but, when there was a tax increase last year of $22, all right, that may not sound like a big deal to anybody. $22, that's 50 cents a week. If we don't stand up for what we truly believe in,
I really think we're making mistakes. Again, I know the $5 would be well spent. I will say this, I think there's a lot of people, and unfortunately, I think the media has portrayed it. If you really read this, this would really be up to PennDOT where that money goes. The city's not going to drive this to say that the money would go to the McBride Viaduct or anywhere else. It's not a popularity contest as to where that money would go. There's very stringent rules as to how that is to take place. But I spoke longer than I should. I will not be in favor. Thank you.
Any other discussion? I just, point of clarification that according to state law, it's maximum $5, so that's essentially, it's up to $5. I think that, a lot of people ask, well, didn't they just increase the gas tax, Well, yeah, that was part of the same act. Sadly, and I don't know if everybody here knows it, but, a lot of that money that was used specifically for roadways and bridges infrastructure, a lot of that ended up being used for state highway police. And even though I think we all agree that the state highway police need money to operate, it's like this catch-22 of municipalities that are unwilling to merge and use the economies of scale, or municipalities that refuse to have their property taxes essentially to support a police force. What ends up happening is the state police end up serving as the de facto police in that municipality. So what ends up happening is we all end up giving our highway and infrastructure money to them because our local governments won't look for cost-saving measures to provide policing on our own. So it's almost like something we created ourselves. But I would actually rest a lot of the fault on the state legislature because they could create a separate revenue stream for the state police, and they've talked about it at length. But also, they're going to the counties and saying, hey, sorry we didn't give you enough money for roadways and bridges, but you're allowed to raise taxes so that you do have enough money for roadways and bridges. So regardless of how this goes today, again, I would urge you to talk to your state legislatures for what it's worth to get them to correct this financial fiasco that's put our infrastructure at risk. So that being said, I will move on to roll call of ordinance number 128.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
No.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 139 in title only.
A second reading of ordinance number 139, 2017, an ordinance of the County of Erie, Pennsylvania, authorizing the recorder of deeds to collect additional recording fees for the express purpose of demolition of blighted property within the county.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Leone, second by Dr. Faust. Any discussion?
Chairman.
Dr. Faust.
Just I will amplify a lot of what we said regarding the last ordinance, that, these will be funds that can get into the local communities and the local neighborhoods that can help fight blight and will complement the efforts of the Neighborhood Improvement Revitalization Fund, et cetera. And I would also just, again, amplify what you said regarding the state legislature. The reason why a lot of these remedies have to be assessed at the local level is because they're not being addressed at the state level where they really ought to be. And in some ways, it makes it more expensive because here at the local level, because all of the Commonwealth citizens are not sharing in the cost. It's just the local community. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just
Mr.
real
DiMatteo.
quick, contrary to what I said with the last, this has to do with people who are purchasing new homes. This isn't an arbitrary tax on just everyone throughout Erie County. And in what we have hopefully enacted with the land bank moving forward, these funds can be used very effectively, I would hope, not just within the city, but throughout Erie County.
Any other discussion? Roll call?
On ordinance 139, Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Second reading of ordinance number 140 in title only.
A second reading of ordinance number 140, 2017, amendment to the administrative code Article 6, Section 12D, Financial Procedures.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Faust, seconded by Mr. Leone. Any discussion? Roll call.
Mrs. Fatika?
Yes.
Dr. Faust?
Yes.
Mr. Leone?
Yes.
Mrs. Law?
Yes.
Mr. Horton?
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo?
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman?
Yes. Possible adoption of resolution number 64, title only.
Resolution number 64, 2017, appointment of firm to perform comprehensive single audit for Erie County and related funds for the year ending December 31, 2017.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Faust, seconded by Mr. Leone. Any discussion? Roll call.
On Resolution 64, Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leone.
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Moving on to new business, possible adoption of resolution number 67 in title only. Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Resolution number 67, 2017, increase of fees for services for county council certified public accounting firm.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Dr. Faust, seconded by Councilman Horton. Any discussion? Roll call.
On Resolution 67, Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo.
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Possible adoption of resolution number 68 in title only.
Resolution number 68, 2017, resolution to approve the annual budget of the Erie County Council, Erie Area Council of Governments for the calendar year ending December 31, 2018.
So moved.
Moved by Dr. Faust and seconded by Councilman Leone. Any discussion? Roll call.
On Resolution 68, Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Leone.
move for the reappointment of Ron Jones to a 5-year term to Erie County Industrial Development Authority.
Moved by Mr. Leone and seconded by Councilman Horton. Any discussion? Roll call.
On the appointment, Mr. Horton,
Yes.
Mr. DiMatteo,
Yes.
Mrs. Fatika,
Yes.
Dr. Faust,
Yes.
Mr. Leone,
Yes.
Mrs. Law,
Yes.
Chairman Brenneman.
Yes. Before we adjourn, as customary, I believe, outgoing council members get a chance to say some parting words.
Can I have a
Mr.
question?
DiMatteo,
Just a
yes.
question first.
Yeah.
On ordinance number 124, can you tell me, there's only 3 signatures on here, and that's why I just didn't know who,
Somebody missed.
and it's a rather important ordinance, that's why.
Yeah, I believe, is Mr. Horton, I believe, did you sign it? Because you did vote in the affirmative on it.
Yeah, I did.
Oh,
Mem-
okay, no, that's, okay,
Okay. That clarify your,
okay, yeah, no, that's fine, yeah, I just wanted to make sure that I didn't.
okay. Just trying to delay my final speech, is what you're trying to do.
Time's up.
That's right. You can't kick me. You're too far away, Councilwoman. Most of my parting words you'll actually find in an upcoming Erie Times editorial, so I'll save a lot of that for that. Read it if you have the paper. It's supposed to be published some point between now and the end of the year. So this is my 4th and final year on council. I have to say that it's been quite interesting, particularly working a second job in order to do this. I'm not going to say anything about the ages because I'm by far not the youngest member to ever serve on this body, but of recent I am, and I'm hopeful that other young people will run for elected office, particularly when it comes to these seats. And I know it can often be, and just personally I understand because it takes time out of your schedule. I've had to take time out of my take money out of my pocket, my paycheck, in order to attend a lot of these meetings, not just these meetings and the committee meetings, but also with the numerous liaisonships and other things that go as part of this job. So, being paid $4.84 or whatever it is an hour to be a council member, you're definitely not in it for the money, hopefully not in it for the fame, because I still have people that don't know, they know my name, but they don't know what I do or which council I'm on. But it's been a great experience. I think in the past 4 years, we've moved forward a lot of transformative projects. I'm proud to say that's been successful. But I had to say, other than the council members that I've had the honor of serving with, including our late friend, Phil Fatika, that I learned a lot from everybody here. It's been great. And while I will not be sitting behind here, I'm not going anywhere. I still own a home, and I probably wouldn't be able to sell it and earn a profit anyways because I put so much money into fixing it up. So, and my kids go to school here. We work here. I'm not going anywhere. So, and you'll definitely see me around. I'm 35 years old. I'm going to be out and about when I get the itch. But I want to thank Doug and Lana and Danae for being probably the best support I possibly could have had, who've put up with my random phone calls over the past 4 years. Hey, can you look this up? Can you do this? Get to that. It's always whenever I have an idea, and I always have lots of ideas. And I couldn't do it without you guys. You guys have been absolutely phenomenal. If people don't know this, an elected official is only as good as your staff. And I think County Council has some fantastic staff. And I know that regardless of who's in this seat, that you guys will help make them successful. So thank you guys. And, to Tom and Joe, you guys have been great support. I can't imagine any elected body that doesn't have a financial advisor or solicitor. You definitely made our world easier or more interesting throughout the time. But again, thank you guys for all your help and assistance. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. DiMatteo. And Mr. DiMatteo, you get the final remarks for today's special meeting.
Well, thank you. And to reiterate a lot of the same things that Jay said, I think first off, my family's not here, but for all what they've put up for the past 5 years, I think it's quite remarkable. And I think Jay brings up a great point, because I used to tell people, and unless you're really here, you don't understand, but there's days that I actually had to find time to go to work. There's an awful lot of demands. There's an awful lot of people pulling at you for answers and trying to get things figured out, that it's really much more labor intensive than anybody really has any idea. But again, I agree. I think Doug and Danae and Lana, you guys do an absolute remarkable job. And I wish Lana could have been here, because like when I walk in the office and just scream Lana, and then she gets all nervous, and Doug gets mad because the whole day's ruined then at that point. But no, but it really is, as Jay said, they're a wonderful staff. I think you guys are tops in the courthouse, and yet Tom and Joe, I think you guys do a wonderful job. And I guess what I'm going to miss most is just the people I've met, and not just in my district, obviously, but here at the courthouse. I guess a lot of the friends that I've made, whether it's, Sue Ellen, who I see not every Saturday at church, but a lot of times on Saturday, her and Luigi, and, just the people I see from, out and about from the courthouse. I think it's been a rewarding experience. I would like to think that, all the decisions I've made have always been for the right reasons. A lot of times they're not always popular, and a lot of times we don't always agree here on council, but I will tell you this, there's times where, and most recently, I know Kyle and I had a very lively discussion, but, after.
You may have heard it.
Yeah, you may have heard it, and you may have heard it out on 6th Street. But, but in the end, we always seem to come to a consensus. And I think that's what's important that people don't understand about county council, or at least county government. There's things that go on in Washington and Harrisburg that are terribly unsavory. And if you have a D or an R next to your name, in the middle you shall not meet. We compromise on things here. And at the end of the day, if I vote yes and somebody else votes no, we go out and eat all the time after our meetings too. We still get along. We still discuss things. We're still friends at the end of the day. And I really think that's what's most important. And I think that's what I'll miss. But again, thank you to everyone here.
Mr. Chairman,
Councilwoman?
I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
those of you in the audience that don't know these two gentlemen that are leaving, they're going to be very missed. And they're very good council members. They've done a wonderful job. And we are going to remember them with a lot of fondness. And it's more, with us, it's more than just 7 people sitting up here. And we are like a family. Families don't always agree, but families come together, and that's what we've done. We are a family. And these two people work very hard at what they've done, and for very little pay. And they've given all they could for the job that they were elected to do. And it's going to be like a family member moving away, and they're going to be very heartily missed. And thank you very much, both of you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mr. Chairman,
Dr. Faust.
you both have done good work. Good luck to you both.
Thank
you. And it's been a pleasure working with you. Move to adjourn.
We stand adjourned.
You broke that.